Hello everyone. In this video we're going to learn another very useful function in Pandas. The name of this function is Groupby, and as the name suggests, it basically in a very intelligible and most of the time very useful for your analytics way group your data and does a lot of very good calculations. So through a couple of examples we're going to learn how to use this function Groupby. So let's get to it. Okay, so first and foremost, as always, we import the modules we want to work with, which it's here is Pandas. So I import Pandas, and also we read the latest version of our data set, which is the air quality data that we've been cleaning. So we also bring that here, and then we get to the function Groupby. Groupby, as the name suggests, basically is going to group your data based on a specific column. So for example here, I want to group by my rows in my data frame based on their species or the measurement that they have. And I want to see the size or how many rows in this data frame do I have that the species is based on different one of them. So I can say group by and then say size. And then I know for each of the measurements, I have the same number of measurements. And the reason is because, in each year I have a specific number of days, and in each day I'm doing 24 readings. And that's why for all of those values in each year, I get the same amount of readings or the same amount of rows. So as you saw, I used an aggregate function to be able to sort of like take advantage of Groupby. There are different aggregate functions, and one by one we get to know them. One of the very useful one that we actually have used before when we wanted to sort of like summarize the whole data set was describe. You could also use describe as an aggregate function with Groupby. So for example, I group by my data based on the weekday, and I say describe, and it does everything that it did for the whole data for each group of the data. So here I get the count, mean, standard deviation, minimum, 25%, 55%, 75% maximum for each of the numerical attributes. So here, for me to make this a little bit more intelligible, perhaps it's better for me to do this on value. So if I do this, now I have the count, mean, standard deviation, minimum, maximum, all of the quartiles for all of the possible weekdays. And I could see, for example, based on the mean, what are those time of the week that leads to more pollution. And I can see really quickly that Friday and Monday and Thursdays are the one that has highest pollution, and also Sunday and Saturday on average are the ones that are lowest pollution by just very simple calculation. So there are a couple of aggregate functions you can be using. You could be using count, sum, mean, MAD, which is mean absolute deviation, median, minimum, maximum, mode, standard deviation, variance, and unbiased standard error of the mean. So all of these are built in Pandas, and you can be just using them based on the type of Groupby that you have in mind to help you in your analysis. So a couple of more examples here. For example, I want to do a Groupby by the number of each species, and if I do by value.count, it tells me that there's some of these values that have less data, and the reason is these values perhaps have some missing values. Or I could be saying I want the value.mean, or any of these functions here, and it does just do the calculation for me. I could also be doing group by multiple columns. You see, I'm doing the group by one of the columns, but I could also be doing it by multiple columns. So for example, here, I do the group by based on species and date, and I get the mean for them. And you can see it leads to a multi-level index for this data frame. And for each species and each date, I get to have the mean value of all of these values. So most of the time, we're only going to need the value. So I switch this to value. So I have much, don't have, the data that I don't really need. And since this is only one column and the rest is index, because of this, this is showing as a Pandas series, not a data frame. So let's work on an example together. So we want to write a code that reports the average and the standard deviation of all of the air pollution measurements, naming NO, NO2, NOx, PM10, and PM2.5 for every month. To do this, we need to group by our data based on species and month, and then do our calculations. There are two ways to go about this. You could, find a series for your species and month based on the minimum, and then you could also do another one for standard deviation, and then put these together and create a data frame. So let's go ahead and sort of like do this separately before we get to this part, so for you to see what's happening really here. So this is one of the series that you're getting grouped by based on species and month, and then these are the average values, and you could do another one, and the same thing is both just standard deviation. So all you're doing, you're basically putting two series into next to one another and giving them a name and creating a data frame. And that's how it looks like. Now it becomes a data frame based on mean and standard deviation. Another approach you could have taken was to use the function describe and then drop some columns that you don't need. So if you do this, you will get all of those values, but also you get like other things that you don't need here. So the disadvantage here is the fact that you're doing some calculation that you don't need, and it's sort of waste of computation. Because of that, this might not be the best way to go about this. The first way, which are exactly the same way, the same answers, will be computationally less expensive. So let's do another example together before we finish this video. So we want to use the adult data from the previous week to create a list that shows the number of people with income smaller than 50K and also higher than 50K. So remember something about the adult data was the fact that each row was not representing an individual. Each row was representing a profile of individual, and the final weight or FNL weight in the column were showing how many people in the population this or each row represent. So for us to be able to find the number of people with this amount of salary, we have to do a sum on that column based on the education and income group by. And it's a very simple way to do this analysis, and now we have just a click away we get the result that we can look at and make sense of our population.